So hi guys. So in this video we are going to make the collision between the player laser and the invader. So what we want is that when the laser hits the invader, it should destroy it. So right now if we try to shoot the invader, the laser just passes through the invader and continues on the way up. So what we want to add now is a way to destroy the invader when it's hit by the player laser. And we have several ways that we can do it. One of the first ways that we can think about it is to detect the collision with the invader on the player laser. So we know that, for example, I think we talked about it, but before that, we have this block, which is a touching block from the sensing category that detects the collision between this sprite and the one that we select here. So for example, we could come here to the player laser and say, okay, so I want to touch the invader and then do something about it. And this is the first way that we could do it. I mean, detect the collision on the player laser, and then the player laser would tell the invader that it was shot and it should destroy itself. We still haven't seen how to communicate between sprites, so we don't know how to one sprite can tell the other one to do something, but that's possible. Now the problem here is that, and why this way doesn't work, is that while we can send messages between sprites, so we can use a block. I'm not going into this kind of blocks right now, but so that you know that it exists, we have these blocks that allow us to broadcast messages. And we can broadcast a message, and another sprite might be listening to that message and do something when receives it. Now, the problem here is that we cannot send a message to a specific sprite. I mean, since we are going to be creating clones of the invader, because we need 55 invaders in total, so we are going to be using one sprite and then cloning the invader to get all the others. Now, the problem would be that when the laser broadcasts a message to tell the invader that he was shot, we cannot tell specifically to one specific invader that that's the one that was shot, or that's the one that was hit. So the problem that all invaders will receive that message, so it wouldn't work. And on a future video, we'll go back to these broadcast messages and everything, so don't worry about this concept right now. This is just to explain you why we won't go with this route. Now, another route we could take would be to detect the collision on the invader. So the invader would detect the collision with the laser, and then would tell the laser that he hit something and it should destroy it. And this would work because since we only have one laser on the screen at a single time, if the invader tells the laser that he hit something, we will be telling the correct laser because we only have one. Now, I don't like this approach that much because if we want to change that rule, I mean, even if the original game only has one laser at a time, if we in the future decide to change that rule, I mean, we might decide to add some power-up to the game where when the player picks up the power-up, he can shoot a lot of times in a row, so he can have several lasers on the screen at a single time. And that method would stop working. So that's not all. That's also not the best way to do it. So that leaves us with the third option, which is basically to do both things. I mean, we are going to detect, the laser is going to detect the collision with the invaders, and it's going to do what it needs to do, and the invader is going to also detect the collision with the laser, and it's going to do its own thing. So we don't have to communicate between the sprites, and each sprite detects a collision with the other one and does whatever it needs to do. So that's the best way, at least in the way that I think about it. So right now we can start with the laser because we are already destroying the laser. Right now we are destroying the laser when it reaches the top edge of the screen. So we have it here. So if the Y position is greater than 170, then we set laser count and delete the clone. So we are already destroying the laser. So the only thing that we need to do here is to add this condition. So the laser will not only destroy when the Y position is greater than 170, but it will also destroy itself when it touches the invader. So basically what we need to do is to add a new condition to this if statement. Now, the condition or the block that we are going to use is the OR block from the operation section. And why OR and not AND? Because the OR block works in the following way. The OR block is true when one of the conditions is also true, which means that this if condition will be true, running the code that is inside, when this condition is true or when this condition is true. And that's the thing that we need right now, because we'll destroy the laser when the Y position is greater than 170 or when the laser shot is touching the invader. I dragged also the AND block here to show you that the AND block wouldn't work on this case. And why? Because the AND block requires that both conditions are true to make it true in the whole condition. So this would mean that if we use the AND block here, the laser shot would only be destroyed when the Y position was greater than 170 and was touching the invader at the same time. So we could only destroy the laser when it would touch the invader when its position was greater than 170. So this wouldn't work. So right now, the OR block is what we need. And let's try it. So right now, if we try to shoot the invader, you can see that the laser is destroyed when it hits the invader and does not continue moving to the top. So the part of the laser shot is done. Now we can go to the invader. So let's go to the invader, and we are going to need to detect the collision with a laser shot. So we already know that we need the block touching, and in this case we are going to change the touching to touching the laser. And we also know that we need a condition. So basically what we need is an if-then block. So if this sprite is touching the laser, then we are going to destroy the sprite. We will deal with that in a second. So now we have the condition, we can have the code inside. Now where to put this condition? Basically we are going to be checking for this collision all the time, because we need to check it on every frame so that we can detect the collision happening in real time. And one thing we might think of doing is putting this if block inside the forever block, because we are already running this loop forever, so it's running in the whole time the game is also running, and we will think that, okay, so maybe I can add this here to detect the collision. But that wouldn't work. And why? Because we have a wait seconds. And what this means is that since this loop is waiting for 0.2 seconds on every frame, it means that it's not running at all times. So while it will be able to work on most cases, there will be some times where the collision happens while this forever loop is waiting, and so the collision wouldn't be detected, and so the invader wouldn't be destroyed. So we can't use it inside the forever block. This is just to show you that when you have a forever block with a wait seconds, you need to make certain that you can't use the same block when you need to be checking something on every frame. Like on this case, like forever, if you were checking for input from the player, I mean, if you wanted to check for if the player is pressing a certain key, you cannot do it inside a forever block that has a wait seconds, because it won't work every time. So maybe not. The best solution here is to add a new green flag block and to add a new forever block, and then we can put this inside. And there's not a problem having two different green flags with forever blocks. I mean, this is going to be running and also this is going to be running. So that's the best solution. And then it's also a good way, a good practice, at least I prefer it this way, because we can separate what we are implementing. So this block right here, or this group of blocks, deal with changing the costume. This right here deals with destroying the invader, and then we'll have a bunch more afterwards. So when we click the green flag, we start the forever block and we keep checking if the invader is touching the laser. And now inside we are going to destroy an invader. Right now, we are not going to destroy the invader per se, because in the future we are going to be using clones of the invader. Like I said, we are going to be using one sprite to instantiate all the invaders that we need. So right now, since we are not using that at the moment, we won't be destroying the invader, we'll just hide the invader. But just think that, okay, in the future, this won't be hiding the invader, we'll be actually destroying it. But since it's the original sprite, we can destroy it. So let's just hide it to see if it's working. And we can run, and now you can see that the laser touched the invader and the invader disappeared. And now you can see also that we have maybe a small bug, because you see that the invader disappears, but the laser shot continues. So it seems that what was working before, now it's not working anymore. And why? Basically because since each object is detecting the collision and doing something about it, what happens here is that when we hide the invader, the invader detects the laser shot and hides itself. And what happens is that since the invader is hidden, the laser shot is not able to detect the collision as well. And so it continues like nothing happened. That was what's happening right now, because if I take this out and I show the invader again, now it's working again because we are not hiding the invader. And we'll deal with this in a moment if we still have problems, because what we are going to do right now will probably solve this. Let's see. So when the laser shot hits the invader, we hide the sprite. That's one thing. Now, before hiding the sprite or deleting the clone, as we will be doing afterwards, we want to show the costume of the explosion. We know that our invaders have a costume of the explosion to give the effect that the invader was destroyed. So what we want to do first is to change the costume to the explosion, and only then we hide the invader. So we already know how to change costumes. We have in the looks category, we have the switch costume. So before hiding, we can change the costume to invader explosion. And if we do this and try to run, we can see it. And why? Because once again, we are switching the costume, but we are not giving it time to show that the costume changed before hiding it. So we are switching the costume, and immediately afterwards we are hiding the sprite, and so we cannot see that change. So what we need to do here is to add a wait second. So we add a wait seconds block. Let's put it 0.2, and let's try it again. Oh, and we have to show the invader because we are hiding it at the bottom, and so we need to show it before starting the game. We are going to add a block. I mean, we can add it right now on the looks. Let's add a show. So every time the game starts, we are going to show the invader again. So we don't have to keep pressing to show the invader right here. And now we can shoot the invader. We can see the explosion, but it had like a strange effect. You saw that it kind of blinked. You know, like you could see that it actually changed the costume, but it changed again and it destroyed afterwards. Let me show you again. So you have the invader. I'm going to shoot it. And you see, it blinked, so we could see the explosion. It came back to the costume of the invader, and then it destroyed, or it was hidden. So what's happening here is that since we have these two forever blocks, both of them are running. And so what's happening is that we switch the costume to the invader explosion, and that's happening. But since we are waiting 0.2 seconds, and this forever box keeps running, what's happening is that it will eventually switch the costume back to number 1 or number 2. In this case, it's probably changing to the next costume. So what's happening is that the invader has costume number 1 or 2, or we don't know. It depends when it gets hit. The laser touches the invader. We switch the costume to the explosion, and we wait. And while we are waiting, this keeps running, and probably it will hit the next costume. So it changes the costume back to number 1, and only then it will go to it will run the hide block, and that's exactly what happened. So that's why we have this blinking effect. So we need to add another condition here that we can only change the costume, we can only run the next costume when the invader is not being destroyed. And we know that the invader is being destroyed when it has the costume of the invader explosion. So basically what we need to do is to add a new condition to run the next costume. So we only run the next costume when the invader costume number is not equal to 7, which is the number of the invader costume. And now let's go to the operators section, because we know that's where we have the blocks to make comparisons. And we have this block, which allows us to make a comparison between, we already know, well, it's exactly like the one in the top, so maybe we can just like duplicate this. So now what we want is that we'll only call the next costume when the costume number is not equal to 7. And here we have exactly the opposite, so the costume number is equal to 7. And we don't have a block, we only have greater, less than, and equal. We don't have a block that says not equal. But we have another block that we can use, which is the not block. And in conjunction, if you put the not block and the other one inside, we have exactly what we want. So this block is, if costume number is not equal to 7, then it runs the next costume. So every time you need to negate a certain comparison, to get the opposite of the comparison, you can use the not block. And now let's try it. So we have the invader. I'm going to destroy it. We could see the explosion, and then it was hidden. Okay, now we have another problem, because what happened here is that since we are destroying the invader, we are changing the costume to the invader explosion, and then we stop the game. So it means that the invader keeps the costume of the explosion, does not come back automatically to the first costume. So we always remember that when you do something, when you change something on the sprites that changes the way that they appear at the beginning, you need to reset that configuration. So if we change the costume to another one, we need to go back to the original costume when we start the game. So we are just going to duplicate this switch to costume number 1, and I'm going to put it back here. We're going to put it here when we click the green flag. So when the game starts, the invader will always get the first costume. Now let's try it again. So it's okay, we destroyed the invader, we have the explosion, and it disappeared. And if you run again, it's all working perfectly. Yeah, that's correct. And you can see also that the bug that we had before, where we were shooting the invader and the laser shot would just continue moving up, it disappeared. Why? Because we are waiting, because we are switching the costume to another one, and we are waiting. And so, since we are waiting and the invader is still visible, still has a costume, the laser shot is still able to detect the collision. So now we don't have that problem. And that's it. No, we're still missing one thing, which is the invader explosion sound. We already know how to do it, so we can just go to the Sounds tab on the invader sprite and upload the sound, which I have it here, sounds, and I have explosion invader. Yeah, I renamed the sounds, so this was probably... sorry, it's not showing because... yeah, set filter for the file type. So this was probably one of the explosion sounds. It's in the pack, let me see. Oh, it's this one, explosion crunch 000. This is the one that I'm using. And so I'm going to import explosion invader. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to put it a little bit softer. And basically what we want is that we want to play the sound when the invader gets destroyed, which is inside this block. And we are going to do it before the wait block. So sound, start sound, explosion invader, that's correct. And please make sure that you drag the start sound and not the play sound until done, because if you use the play sound until done, then we'll stop the execution here. Only then we'll switch the costume, and only then we'll wait for the 0.2 seconds, and we don't want to wait here. Probably, now that I'm thinking, probably, I don't know. Oh, I can see the length of the sound, but maybe we could even use the play sound until done instead of the wait seconds. We'll try it in a bit just to see if it works, but let's see. So it's working. Let me just try it just to see if it works. Okay, so we're gonna play the sound until done, and we don't need the wait seconds anymore, and we are going to switch the costume before playing the sound until done. Sound is probably a little bit too big, you know, so the animation is not like, it seems that it takes a lot of time to disappear. Yeah, no, let's go back. Just something that I remember, that it worked, you know, but it really depends on the length of the sound. And even if you use a different sound, it might be really weird. So let's just go back to what we had before. So we're gonna play the sound, switch the costume, wait, and only then hide the invader. And start the sound, and let me check. Yeah, perfect. And that's it. This is all about the destroying the invaders, having the collisions. And just remember this when we are talking about collisions, and when we are talking about one sprite colliding with another one, I think the first thing that we think about on how to solve this problem is that we can just detect the collision on one side and tell the other one that something happened, and the other one will do something about it. But since we cannot send messages to specific clones, it might get a little bit difficult to do this. So I think that the best way is to detect collisions on both sides and do whatever we want with it. That's it, guys. So I'll see you in the next video. I think in the next video, what we are going to be dealing with is, instantiating the invader. So right now we only have like one invader here. What we are going to do next is creating the code to take this sprite and create all the clones that we need to get the whole columns and rows of invaders. That's it. So I'll see you guys on the next video.